Hi folks, I'm glad you're able to connect with the message today. We're going to be looking at the heart behind serving and the compassion of Jesus and the reason Jesus serves and therefore the heart behind our service. So as you connect with the message today, my prayer is that you don't just hear a word, but that you are moved by compassion at God's love and compassion for you. I want to read to you from Mark chapter 10, verses 46 to 52. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and he said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." So Bartimaeus threw aside his cloak. He jumped up and he came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My rabbi," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." And instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. Put the first slide up, thanks. We are in a sermon series looking at the heart behind the call to discipleship and to be an ambassador of God's kingdom. We know that God has called us to be ambassadors of his kingdom. And before we get to the practical how-to, we need to have a look at the heart that sits behind it, the heart that motivates being an ambassador. So we're grounding ourselves in the story from John 13, where Jesus takes off his outer robe, he wraps himself in a towel, and he serves his disciples. This is the heart behind the call of being an ambassador. It's a heart to serve those who are in our front lines, and that can be our family, that can be people at work, in our social context, at sport, extended family, church, wherever we find ourselves. So in this passage today, we see Jesus is coming to the pointy end of his ministry. This is his final journey towards Jerusalem. So while the text doesn't particularly tell us this, I imagine there's a lot going on for Jesus in his heart and in his mind. He may have been thinking things like, have I taught them everything they need to know? Have I shown them all the things they need to see? Do I really have to go through with this? I'm sure there was a whole lot going on for him right now. Jesus would have been feeling quite vulnerable in this story and in this part of the journey. So not only is there some internal busyness going on for him, but there was also external busyness all around him. When they reached Jericho, as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. There was hustle and bustle and jostle and pushing and pulling and shoving and talking and calling and shouting. Everyone was wanting to see Jesus, be near Jesus, touch Jesus. They were wanting something from him. So there was a lot going on for Jesus in this story. The road from Jericho to Jerusalem was approximately 27 kilometres, so that's a good hike for anyone. And Jerusalem was situated about, 800 metres above sea level? And Jericho was around 300 metres below sea level. So the journey wasn't just a long one, it was perilous. It was up and down over treacherous land. And so this was a big journey for him physically as well. He faced a long, hard, and possibly treacherous walk to Jerusalem. Yet, with all of this going on in and around him, Jesus heard one lonely, solitary voice calling out above the crowd. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Love this part of the story. Who else likes to defy bossy people? "Be quiet." "No, I'm going to shout louder." High five to Bartimaeus. He'd obviously heard about Jesus, and he had concluded that Jesus was the Messiah, because the title, Son of David, is a messianic title. So even though Bartimaeus lacked physical sight, he saw far more clearly than the multitudes who actually had sight. He saw more clearly than the religious leaders did, than the crowd did, and even Jesus' disciples. So Bartimaeus was blind. He was a beggar. He was marginalized by his community, and he would have been feeling incredibly vulnerable. Yet he knew that Jesus was more than a healer and a teacher. He knew that Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God, who came to redeem Israel. And so he called upon the mercy of Jesus. Mercy in this text means compassion in action. So, for example, if you've got a neighbour or a family member or a friend who's been unwell, they've had surgery, you might ask them, "Is there anything I can do for you? Can I come and mow your lawn for you? Can I get some groceries for you? Can I take you to your next hospital visit?" That's mercy. That is compassion in action. It's putting an action to what we're feeling in our heart. Mercy doesn't just make us feel something, it makes us do something to alleviate suffering. So Jesus had mercy on every person who came to him for help, because people were anxious, people were hurt, people were vulnerable, people were helpless. He didn't just show mercy to people who we might think deserved it. He showed mercy to everyone, even the people who didn't deserve it. And this led Jesus to healing people and delivering them and teaching them and feeding people who came to him. Jesus' response to Bartimaeus was threefold. It was upward, inward, and outward. Upwardly, Jesus engaged with this man with God's heart of compassion and God's heart of mercy and God's power and God's authority, because everything Jesus did was done in the heart of God. Inwardly, Jesus was moved with compassion. And then outwardly, he acted on that compassion with mercy. And he taught and delivered and fed. And in this case, he healed. So Jesus embodies the mercy of God. He was God's compassion in action to anyone who was in need. Not only did Jesus fully embody God's mercy, but he taught it. And he expected his disciples to be merciful. So I want to give you a few examples. There's a lot of examples in the Gospels. I'm just giving you a few of them today. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus says, "Love your enemies, do good to them." I mean, that can knock us off our perch, that one. Love your enemies and do good. It's not just an emotion, it's an action involved. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you'll truly be acting as children of the Most High, because God is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. And you must be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. So mercy says, I'm going to do good to people whether they deserve it or not. There's a challenge for any person. Then Jesus demanded that the Pharisees offer mercy and not sacrifice. So from Matthew chapter 9, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed Jesus. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, and he also invited other tax collectors and disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw it, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with such scum?" That's a bit intense. When Jesus heard this, he said, "Healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do." And then he said to the Pharisees, "Now you go and learn the meaning of this scripture. I desire you to show mercy, not sacrifice. Because I've come to call those who I haven't come to call those who think they're righteous. I've come to those who know they are sinners." You see, the Pharisees were so quick to follow all of these ceremonial laws and just dot every I and cross every T and make sure it was right. But their heart was not in it. Their heart was not in the right place. They looked at people in need and just walked on by them and let them go. And Jesus is like, "No, you've got it wrong. What I prefer is for you to stop and attend to those who are vulnerable and in need. I'd rather you do that than bring your tithes and your offerings to the temple. I desire mercy, not sacrifice." At another time, Jesus accused the scribes and Pharisees of neglecting the weightier matters of the law, which is mercy. So reading from Matthew 23, "What sorrow awaits you teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are careful to tithe, even the smallest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the weightier, important aspects of the law like justice and mercy and faith. You should tithe, yes, but don't neglect the more important things. You are blind guides. You strain your water so you don't accidentally swallow a gnat, but you are willing to swallow a camel." Just read chapter 23 of Matthew because Jesus is on a roll. Here, he is saying that doing all of these outward things is good, but what's more important is the heart behind it. A heart that notices suffering and vulnerability, and a heart that is willing to stop and do something about it. That is mercy. All of this teaching is so perfectly summed up in the parable of the Good Samaritan. And so I read to you from Luke chapter 10. By the way, this Good Samaritan happened to be walking along the same road that Jesus is about to walk from Jericho and Jerusalem. So, a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw a man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to that man, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." So Jesus says to the man, "Which of these 3 was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits?" The man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same." So mercy is not just a feeling. It's not about feeling sorry for a certain situation or a person. It's putting it into action and doing something to alleviate that person's suffering. So, it's a core element of God's heart and character, and it's fully embodied in Jesus. He taught it consistently, and now as disciples of Jesus, we are called and expected to have this quality in our heart. So let me ask you, when have you been merciful? When have you noticed a need around you and gone, oh, I'm going to do something about that? Because that is mercy. You have been an ambassador of God's kingdom. You have. This is something to celebrate. We need to encourage one another in those moments to say, thank you for doing. That's why we honour God at work. Thank you for the way in which you serve. Thank you for showing mercy. Maybe it's been through sponsoring a child, or maybe it has been just in a random act of kindness where you saw a need and went, oh, here, let me help you, put your groceries in your car. Something that has just been helpful to alleviate someone's suffering. Last week, we heard the story of a little servant girl taken captive by a foreign army to serve in the household of the commander of that army. She is a living example of mercy. She had compassion on the man who took her captive, and she acted on that compassion. It's easy. It can be quite seamless. When it's in our heart, when our heart is filled with mercy, it's a seamless action for us. We see a need, we meet it where we can, with what resources we have at the time. So I wonder who you might encounter this week who needs to experience God's mercy. I suspect it's going to be all around us. For Bartimaeus, his cry for mercy from Jesus expressed an attitude of trust and humility and dependence that Jesus had been teaching for 3 years, inviting his disciples to maintain that. Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he's calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and he came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said, "Teacher, I want to see again." And Jesus said, "Go, your faith has made you well." And immediately he regained his sight and followed Jesus on the way. So Jesus knows this man's desire. Jesus knows the desires of our heart. Jesus knows the needs that we have, but wants us to ask him, wants us to articulate those needs. Once again, Jesus responded to the faith of a believer and healed Bartimaeus instantly. Instantly, go. Simple and powerful. What was happening in this man's body was an outward picture of what had happened in his soul. Bartimaeus encountered the mercy of God for himself, and he was transformed from a helpless man who was going nowhere to a restored man who sets out on the road to discipleship. So have you ever encountered the mercy of God for yourself? Have you ever encountered it yourself? I'm not asking if you've heard about the mercy of God. If you've been in church for a while, you've heard about it. Have you experienced God's mercy for you? God's compassion for you in action? God alleviating your suffering in some way, personally, coming to you and ministering to you? Bartimaeus began with a need, but he went on to gratitude, and he finished with loyalty. And that's a perfect summary of the stages of discipleship. Having a need, encountering Jesus, being grateful, and then being passionate and intentional about our discipleship. So where are you on this journey of discipleship? Are you sitting on the side of the road like Bartimaeus, feeling a little bit disenfranchised from your life, feeling as though you can't see things clearly that are in front of you? Everything's just crowding around you. I don't know what's going on. God, where are you in all of this? Or have you encountered the presence of God and the experience of God, and there's this heartburst of gratitude? Or is it that you are like, absolutely, I am on that journey of discipleship. I am following every footstep. I am hanging off every word of Jesus, and I am seeking to be like him and do the things that he did. Where are you on that journey of discipleship? Bearing in mind that discipleship isn't a linear journey. You don't do one and then you go to second one and then you get to the third one. It is something that we wander in and out of. Even mature Christians, seasoned Christians, can go back to feeling as though they're sitting on the side of a road, feeling a little bit lost and out of sorts, out of the picture. God, where are you in my life? Where are you right now? Maybe have been a disciple for years, fruitful, passionate disciple, but here you are right now on the side of the road. That's okay, because Jesus sees every person. He hears every prayer. And he stops, whether you are on the side of the road, whether you are bursting with joy, whether you are passionately following him. Call out to Jesus wherever you are. He will hear your prayer. If he could hear Bartimaeus among that crowd of people, he can hear you. He will respond with what you need. Not always with what you want, but with what you need. So wherever you are on the journey of discipleship, may you never lose sight of God's mercy. May your heart be continually transformed by God. And may you take off your robe, wrap a towel around your waist, and be the mercy of God to those that you meet. Let's pray.